Hey everyone, I'm Goofyword, back with another episode of Totally Obscure, where we talk about the coolest things you can do with the cards you didn't know you should be playing in Commander. Today, get ready to stay up late and tinker with your servos and thopters as we talk about the Kaladeshian enchantment Midnight Oil. Let's take a look. Midnight Oil is a 4 mana enchantment. It costs 2 black and enters the battlefield with 7 hour counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, you draw an extra card and remove 2 hour counters from Midnight Oil. Your maximum hand size is equal to the number of hour counters on the card, and whenever you discard a card, you lose 1 life. At its most basic, this card is going to allow us to draw an extra card at the beginning of each upkeep, but after a few short turns, all of the hour counters will be gone, and we will have to begin discarding our entire hand at the end step, and losing a bit of life for all the cards we're not able to play. There are a few different ways to use this card. One of them is to simply not care about having to discard because you're going to use your cards every turn, and that'd be a very aggressive deck, and maybe you'll have to discard an extra land or something, but for the most part the extra card you gain each turn is worth the sacrifice. Another option is to play a hand-increasing card effect, something like Anvil of Bogarden or Reliquary Tower, after all of those hour counters are already depleted, because the game kind of remembers the one that's most recently in effect. So if you play a Reliquary Tower after all of the Midnight Oil counters are gone, your hand size doesn't exist, even though Midnight Oil is saying your hand size is 0, Reliquary Tower kind of beats it. So you just have to be aware of which order you played those effects in. You can also kind of enjoy the discarding. If you have a Madness style deck, you're going to want to discard those cards because it's actually an extra opportunity to play them. So if you're madnessing in spells and creatures, usually that's at a reduced cost, so discarding the cards for the cost of 1 life is pretty worthwhile. A completely different strategy with Midnight Oil would be to try to keep the number of hour counters really high, because then your maximum hand size would actually increase instead of decreasing. If you played Midnight Oil in an Atraxa deck, you could continually proliferate its counters so you had more than 7, and then removing 2 is fine because you can keep getting more and more counters to increase your hand size throughout the game. This seems like quite a bit of work, but hey, it's just another way that you could be using Midnight Oil. This card is very good with other cards that care about discard. We already discussed Madness a bit, but this card pairs super well with Bag of Holding, which turns all of those cards you've discarded into essentially a reservoir that you'll be able to draw from later in the game when you get rid of your Bag of Holding to get all of those discarded cards back. That's really powerful. There's also Drakehaven, which turns every card discarded into a potential Drake. And there's Faith of the Devoted, which turns every discarded card into drain against your opponents. These are just ways to get a little bit of extra value from discarding the cards you weren't able to use each turn with Midnight Oil. One interaction with Midnight Oil that I'm still trying to get my head around is how Midnight Oil interacts with Vilis, Broker of Blood. Midnight Oil means you're going to lose a life every time you discard a card, whereas Vilis says every time you lose life, you draw a card. So if you had both on the battlefield, when you discard your hand, you lose 2 or 3 life, however many cards you have. Then you draw that many cards because of Vilis, but then you'd have to discard them again, which means that you would lose life from Midnight Oil, which means that you would draw from Vilis, and it would go that way until you die. And I'm sure there's something you can do, considering this is potentially powerful. It means you're cycling through your whole deck, but without a way to stop it or destroy Midnight Oil, it will just kill you. But if you can figure out a good way to use this interaction to your advantage, please leave me a comment, because I've spent a lot of time thinking about how to make this work, and I'm just not sure if it exists. And that's Midnight Oil. At its baseline, it might seem like drawing an extra card per turn and then essentially losing a life per turn isn't worth it, and you could play something like Phyrexian Arena instead. But you have to know that the life loss is at the end of your turn, so you can take a little bit of extra time, so that could save you a game. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and comment the name of the totally obscure card that you would want to see me cover next. Until then, I'm Goofyword. Have a great day.